Welcome to Evolved Sun. This is Matt Finch, your host, and in today's episode, you're going to learn about the heart of the discipline of the personality from the Law of One. For myself, studying and practicing the discipline of the personality has significantly improved my life in many, many ways. When it comes down to it, it's all about knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and then becoming the creator or becoming a co-creator. The person that comes to mind from our history that completely embodied the disciplined personality was Yeshua, or Jesus Christ. The discipline of the personality is also called the transparent personality, and it's akin to embodying the Logos itself. And the discipline of the personality is paramount to anybody who is on the positive path of adepthood. For today's episode, I'm going to be using as a resource the Raw Contact Resource Series, a concept guide by Gary Bean and Diana Roy of LL Research. LL Research is responsible for the raw material, which was a telepathic trance narrowband channeling that went on for a couple of years, and there was a total of 106 sessions. The book I'm going to be reading from is very helpful in understanding the raw material and the Law of One teachings, as it goes in alphabetical order through all of the main terms from the raw material. And not only does it make it much easier to understand, but it also makes it much easier to actually practice and then embody things like the tools for spiritual growth. And with that being said, I think you're really going to love this episode, and let's get right into it. The disciplines of the personality are the paramount work of any who have become consciously aware of the process of evolution. Ra says, the heart of the discipline of the personality is threefold. 1. Know yourself. 2. Accept yourself. 3. Become the creator. The third step is that step which, when accomplished, renders one the most humble servant of all, transparent in personality and completely able to know and accept other-selves. To become the creator is to become all that there is. There is then no personality in the sense with which the adept begins its learned teaching. As the consciousness of the indigo ray becomes more crystalline, more work may be done. More may be expressed from intelligent infinity. For the positive path, the discipline of the personality results, eventually, in the whole knowledge of the self in micro and macrocosm, and in a finely tuned compassion and love which sees all things as love. Ra says, to the disciplined entity, all things are open and free. The discipline which opens the universes opens also the gateways to evolution. The difference is that of choosing either to hitchhike to a place where beauty may be seen, or to walk, step by step, independent and free in this independence to praise the strength to walk and the opportunity for the awareness of beauty. The hitchhiker instead is distracted by conversation and the vagaries of the road and, dependent upon the whims of others, is concerned to make the appointment in time. The hitchhiker sees the same beauty but has not prepared itself for the establishment in the roots of mind of the experience. Authors note, to engage in self-discovery. Discipline as a noun is a field of study, the archetypes and sexual energy transfers being two such disciplines of spiritual evolution. But more often than not, Ra uses discipline as a verb indicating an activity, exercise, or regimen that trains the mind, body, and spirit to seek the creator upon the path of adepthood. The word seems to have a pejorative connotation to thinkers within the New Age community who see it as antithetical to love, freedom, and spontaneity. I believe that one part of this confusion stems from simply not knowing that in discipline exists true freedom. The other part of this confusion stems from the fact that discipline on this planet indeed has often been used in a negative sense, as a means of negative control of self and other self. Discipline is, in fact, key to advancement on the service to self path. Discipline is also, however, key to advancement into adepthood on the positive path. I'll explore the positive use of discipline by attempting a rudimentary reasoning for the necessity of discipline. With or without discipline, one will move through life. The body will age. Catalyst will strike. Choices will be required. Expectations of conformance to one standard or another will be placed upon the self. But who is doing this living? Who is responding to the moment, making these choices, and processing this catalyst? Undisciplined, the self may exist as a vast composite of past conditioning absorbed from the experiences of life. The voices of parents, schooling, social circles, the mass mind, and our reactions to them offer inputs that literally condition the self to think, behave, respond, and exist in certain ways. Undisciplined, much of this is unconscious and running on autopilot, causing suffering and a divided, fragmented experience of self and others in a hall of mirrors reflecting only images of separation. Discipline, then, may be seen as the conscious determination to engage in self-discovery. In that light, it is the practice of becoming conscious of the conditioned processes already in operation and the deeper identity hidden underneath those patterns. In this journey, the most fundamental thing being disciplined is the attention. Attention is power, but the past conditioning makes conflicting claims upon this power, each voice within the self attempting to have its needs met and its objects of desire fulfilled. Discipline, then, gradually seeks to collect and focus this attention. But toward what end? Enter polarity, for the negative entity will harvest and focus its attention upon control of self and other. The positive entity will harvest and focus its attention upon loving and accepting self and other. It sounds funny that seeking love is a discipline, something one consciously entrains the attention to do. But it's quite true. Our past conditioning likely does not teach the self to constantly seek love. The awakening self, however, disciplines the attention to do so. The same holds true for all values of the positive path. The disciplined use of will consciously seeks service instead of sleep, declines distraction in favor of focus, and frames the moment with the highest questions worthy of pursuing, e.g., where is the love in the moment? How may I see the Creator in the other self? Learning to cultivate gratitude and invoke faith are also disciplines that the self trains the self into. Even spontaneity, the seeming antithesis of discipline, arises through a fine-tuned discipline of the self who has come to know itself, to accept itself, and to become the Creator. This is the will that has been so cultivated through discipline that the self is no longer shackled to past conditioning, the voices of should and do's and do nots. Instead, the centers crystallized and balanced through disciplined work and consciousness. This is the self who surrenders and lives day by day and moment by moment, for the true adept lives more and more as it is. This is the self who acts from a place of inner stillness and who moves in harmony with the one will, free to be and manifest who they are. The way that discipline intersects with the positive values of the loving, forgiving, open heart is explored here. Don asks, am I correct then in assuming that discipline of the personality, knowledge of self, and control, shall I say, and strengthening of the will would be what any fifth density entity would see as those things of importance? Ra responds, in actuality, these things are of importance in third through early seventh densities. The only correction in nuance that we would make is your use of the word control. It is paramount that it be understood that it is not desirable or helpful to the growth of the understanding, may we say, of an entity by itself to control thought processes or impulses, except where they may result in actions not consonant with the law of one. Control may seem to be a shortcut to discipline, peace, and illumination. However, this very control potentiates and necessitates the further incarnative experience in order to balance this control or repression of that self which is perfect. Instead, we appreciate and recommend the use of your second verb in regard to the use of will, acceptance of self, forgiveness of self, and the direction of the will. This is the path towards the disciplined personality. Your faculty of will is that which is powerful within you as co-creator. You cannot ascribe to this faculty too much importance. Thus, it must be carefully used and directed in service to others for those upon the positively oriented path. There is great danger in the use of the will as the personality becomes stronger, for it may be used even subconsciously in ways reducing the polarity of the entity. In this way, you see that discipline is the art of consciously applying, or consciously remembering, one's seeking, which is to say, discipline is the art of using catalyst. And for the positive adept, Discipline is about penetrating the veil, the work of spirit in the indigo ray, and the contact of intelligent infinity. Ra says, wanderers are third density activated in mind, body, spirit, and are subject to forgetting, which can only be penetrated with disciplined meditation and working. The indigo ray is opened only through considerable discipline and practice, largely having to do with acceptance of the self, not only as the polarized and balanced self, but as the creator, as an entity of infinite worth. This will begin to activate the indigo ray. The infinity of the spirit is an even greater realization than the infinity of consciousness. For consciousness, which has been disciplined by will and faith, may contact intelligent infinity directly. It can be viewed as straightforwardly as the analogy of forming a new habit through repetition, but especially visible in learning a skill. Take she who desires to learn to play the piano well. She must discipline her use of time and focus, making short-term seeming sacrifice, choosing to practice the piano instead of watching TV, for long-term gain. This disciplined practice is not self-control as the negative entity wields it. This is harnessing the will and aiming it upon the heart's desire in the midst of infinite choices. It takes repetition and constancy, a continual refocusing of the attention on the desired practice, and an exercising of the will to practice. The complex of mind, body, and spirit, with all its chakras, dynamic interrelationships, and pathways of energy, is itself a piano of sorts. The self must learn to play the instrument of self with creative but learned artistry. This produces harmony, balance, resonance, and beauty. Ra says, the precision with which each energy center matches the original thought lies not in the systematic placement of each energy nexus, but rather in the fluid and plastic placement of the balanced blending of these energy centers in such a way that intelligent energy is able to channel itself with minimal distortion. The mind-body-spirit complex is not a machine. It is rather what you might call a tone poem. While it is a primary priority to activate or unblock each energy center, it is also a primary priority at that point to begin to refine the balances between the energies so that each tone of the chord of total vibratory beingness resonates in clarity, tune, and harmony with each other energy. This balancing, tuning, and harmonizing of the self is most central to the more advanced or adept mind-body-spirit complex. Each energy may be activated without the beauty that is possible through the disciplines and appreciations of personal energies, or what you might call the deeper personality or soul identity. The material for your understanding is the self, the mind-body-spirit complex. There is an interesting conversation to be had regarding discipline in the perennial debate of nature versus nurture. How necessary is self-effort in opening the indigo ray, performing the service of the adept, and realizing the self? Ra touches on this question in a few places. Ra says, there are two main ways, just as there are two main ways of, shall we say, polarizing towards service to others. There are those mind-body-spirit complices upon your plane who do exercises and perform disciplines in order to seek contact with sources of information and power, leading to the opening of the gate to intelligent infinity. There are others whose vibratory complex is such that this gateway is opened, and contact with total service to self, with its primal distortion of manipulation of others, is then afforded with little or no difficulty, no training, and no control. The healing ability, like all other, what this instrument would call paranormal abilities, is affected by the opening of a pathway or shuttle into intelligent infinity. There are many upon your plane who have a random hole or gateway in their spirit energy field, sometimes created by the ingestion of chemicals such as what this instrument would call LSD, who are able, randomly and without control, to tap into energy sources. They may or may not be entities who wish to serve. The purpose of carefully and consciously opening this channel is to serve in a more dependable way, in a more commonplace or usual way, as seen by the distortion complex of the healer. An entity may at any time instantaneously clear and balance its energy centers. Thus, in many cases, those normally quite blocked, weakened, and distorted may, through love and strength of will, become healers momentarily. To be a healer by nature, one must indeed train its self in the disciplines of the personality. In the nature versus nurture question, one hears stories of entities who, without seeming practice or effort, simply awaken to higher consciousness. Eckhart Tolle and Ramana Maharshi come to mind. Yet, Ra's information speaks again and again to the disciplined use of will upon the long, upward road of spiritual evolution. In my understanding of the law of one, everything which unfolds does so as a function or consequence of the operation of free will. So in that light, those who do have spontaneous awakenings have likely performed significant work in previous incarnations. In my read of the following quotes, Ra seems to point to this possibility. Don asks, why are these people able to bend metal and perform other feats of telekinesis? They seem to have no training. They just are able to do it. Ra says, they remember the disciplines necessary for this activity, which is merely useful upon other true color vibratory experiential nexi. Don says, how did Jesus learn this during his incarnation? Ra responds, this entity learned the ability by a natural kind of remembering at a very young age. The one known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt developed very quickly up through red, orange, yellow, and green, and began to work in the Blue Ray Energy Center at a tender age, as you would say. This rapid growth was due, firstly, to previous achievements in past incarnations in the activation of these rays. Carla described how she was able to coast on her spiritual gifts of cheerfulness and faithful attitude without much seeming effort. Ra here points to pre-incarnational design. Ra says, the contact which you now experience costs a certain amount of the energy which each of the group brought into manifestation in the present incarnation. Although the brunt of this cost falls upon the instrument, it is caparisoned by pre-incarnative design with the light and gladsome armor of faith and will to a far more conscious extent than most mind-body-spirit complices are able to enjoy without much training and initiation. Learning to consciously set one's compass and hew to that direction, continually adjusting one's bearings in forward movement through the many deaths, distortion leavings, and transformations, this is discipline. All right, and that concludes this reading. Thank you so much for listening, as always. And at this point, I've made many videos on the Law of One and raw material and a lot of the main concepts and terms using various resources, including this book, the Law of One books 1 through 5, A Wanderer's Handbook, Living the Law of One 101, and others. Check out my playlist on the Law of One or my playlist on Wanderers. And with that being said, thanks so much for listening. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next episode.